Mueller is here. We are sponsoring this town hall, and we thank you all for attending. It's really with a heavy heart that we make note today that the first young person in California has died from an e-motorcycle, and that young person was in San Mateo County. A 16-year-old teenager in Half Moon Bay who was riding an e-motorcycle and was going at a very high rate of speed. We'll be hearing more about it, but it just draws attention to the fact that this is a crisis, and it is incumbent on us to do something serious about it. I was being approached by city council members who wanted us to come up with a draft model ordinance that could be considered. We have that ordinance available for you to look at. Again, it's draft. It's not perfect. We want your input on it. But this is complicated, but it doesn't have to be complicated. Many other countries, particularly in the European Union, have found that there's a real simple way to address this. You can't drive one of these vehicles more than 50 miles an hour, period. And you have to be of a certain age. But in any case, let me show you a video from my son's dash camera. It was just taken the other day on Alameda de los Boys.
Can go backwards. Go backwards on there.
Okay. There's two young people on that bike, one with no helmet, one going, and the driver was going probably close to 40 miles an hour. I'm certain many of you have had encounters just like this. My husband said he had one last night in our community. These e-bikes are coming up on you out of nowhere and at high speeds. We can't look away from this. This is an outcry in our communities to do something, and I strongly agree that we need to do that. I've been working with the county attorney's office and the sheriff's office on this draft ordinance that can reduce the risk. E-bikes are mostly regulated by state law, but as a county, we still have some jurisdiction and can play an important role. This ordinance restates state law, but then adds enforcement in areas the county can regulate. Our hope is that all 20 cities in the county could adopt this ordinance. It's not surprising that with this increase in the number of e-bikes in our communities, we are seeing more injuries. According to the industry, e-bike sales went from 325,000 in 2018 to 1.7 million in 2024. People are getting hurt and hurt badly, and most of these are young children. More enforcement and better education are needed to save lives and reduce injuries. We are very lucky to have 3 experts here today who will share very difficult perspectives on this issue. We will hear from Dr. John Ma from the American College of Surgeons and a Marin Health trauma surgeon. He has operated on patients with severe injuries from e-bike accidents. We'll also hear from Bob Middlestat, an e-bike advocate, a retired, not so retired trial attorney, who will give us an overview of the different kinds of e-bikes and different approaches to regulate them. Our sheriff, Ken Binder, then will tell us what his officers are seeing on the streets and what they can and can't do about it. But before we hear from our experts, I want to turn it to my colleague, Supervisor Ray Mueller, who will say a few words. Oh, many words.
And only a few is necessary. Work with Supervisor Speier, she covers it all real well. And I'm really blessed to see the work that you've done this with your team, Jackie. To all of you, I want to say thank you for being here today. I see folks from all areas of the county represented, and I think that's really what's important today. So as Jackie mentioned, heavy on our heart today is the 16-year-old we lost yesterday on the coast side. What I really want to stress to everybody today who's assembled is the importance of one unified action. If every city and every area goes their own way, we're going to lose the messaging that we need to every family in this county, and every young person in this county. We can't have varying different rules and people not understanding or thinking one thing's applied or being confused. The impact today that we will have is one unified voice together, school district, city, county, law enforcement agency, in order to make sure that these young people, and frankly, not just these young people, but just riders in general, are safe in our counties. It's in our county. So that's what I hope we leave from today. For those of you, I'm very blessed that in my jurisdiction, I see city council members from both Half Moon Bay and Pacifica here. I see our chief from the park. I see folks from my district here. But what I would say to you is that if you leave today and you encounter electeds or you encounter people in public agencies who are reluctant to join us in that one messaging and action, please reach out to our offices so that we can talk to them, so we can all accomplish this together. Thank you.
Okay, we're now going to hear from Dr. John Ma, who I have known for probably close to 2 decades, maybe. He's a Marin-based trauma surgeon who also works at the Chinese hospital in San Francisco. He serves as an elected governor of the American College of Surgeons and has played a central clinical research and advocacy role in addressing the rise of serious e-bike injuries and fatalities in Marin County and beyond. Alongside fellow Marin health trauma surgeons, Dr. Ma helped elevate early concerns regarding this issue in 2022 when frontline clinicians observed a sharp increase in severe e-bike injuries, including fatalities and pedestrian strikes. Dr. Ma, we thank you so much for coming here today.
I'd like to thank Supervisor Speier for the invitation to be here today and everyone here for your interest. I think this ordinance is an important next step forward. Worldwide sales and use of e-bikes increased dramatically in the past decade in America. Surgeons from around the world have reported a very serious pattern of e-bike related injury and death. Being on the clinical front lines, we had a window into this emerging problem and played a key role in communicating to our Marin elected officials and to advocate for change. Marin is recognized as the birthplace of the modern mountain biking industry, and for decades, Marin Health Medical Center has been the key primary hospital treating bicyclists injured across the county. I remember my first e-bike patient in 2020 was an older gentleman who crashed his e-bike into a guardrail and he broke 20 ribs. Unfortunately, he did not survive. By 2022, we had witnessed numerous deaths and became very concerned about the spike in e-bike related deaths, including pedestrians who had been struck by e-bike riders and died, and other patients who unfortunately progressed to become organ donors. In response, the Marin Healthcare District Board sent a letter to the Marin County Board of Supervisors in the winter of 2022 calling for a study. What we witnessed in Marin was two eras. There was an early era with the majority of the deaths from older patients who had the financial resources to purchase earlier generation and more expensive e-bikes to exercise outdoors when gyms closed during the pandemic. In the second era, e-bike prices fell significantly. It became much more affordable, leading to dramatic increases in youth injury. So our first step was to analyze the Marin Health Trauma Registry. We found that e-bike accident victims, compared to regular bicyclists, were nearly a decade older in age, they were more likely to require hospital admission, and they had a higher risk of death. Nearly 1 out of every 8 patients brought to the Marin Health Emergency Room as a full trauma activation died. This was a nearly 37 increased higher risk compared to traditional pedal bicycles. In addition to head injuries and severe chest and abdominal trauma, the e-bike injury pattern included pelvic fractures, which are seen more frequently with motorcycle riders. Although all of the deaths have been in adults, we also witnessed children who crashed on e-bikes, sustaining serious injuries, impacting their future health. We spent the next 18 months to understand the problem further, and as you study it, it only became more and more complex. It's interesting that the first patents for battery-powered bicycles were issued in France and in the United States in the late 1800s, on the left, before cars had been invented. The original design used much heavier batteries of much lower efficiency, making them unwieldy. The major advance was the creation of lightweight lithium-ion batteries, which catalyzed both the rise of the modern e-bike and the electric car industry. There are approximately 350 publications in the world's medical literature about electric bikes and injuries. I'm completing a review with a team of surgeons from across the state. It's interesting that early e-bikes in Asia were initially met with limited enthusiasm. The next early adopter was Europe, and there are many articles from both nations describing severe neurosurgical, orthopedic, and maxillofacial injuries. And I want to highlight that this is despite the motors being limited very often to only 250 watts in those other nations, not the 750 watt motors that we're seeing here in the US. The World Health Organization published this report to protect Chinese e-bike riders, which they noted accounted for nearly 14% of all traffic-related deaths, and this is before the pandemic. With increased safety features, e-bikes increased in popularity in Asia, which now hosts the largest number worldwide. And I would note that strong action was taken in China, which included limiting speeds to 12 miles per hour at one point, limiting the motor to 400 watts, to imposing a maximum weight limit of 40 kilograms, and banning the use of e-bikes in areas where pedestrians are likely to travel. Additionally, health insurers may decline coverage for someone who's been in a crash if any of these rules are violated. The surgical literature is extensive. A 2017 study of Israeli e-bike patients noted that 65% suffered orthopedic injuries. They were more likely to have fatal collisions with other cars. The pediatric population they identified as particularly susceptible. One review noted that 35% of all e-bike related trauma occurs in patients under the age of 18. The 2018 Dutch Level 1 trauma study noted that e-bikes only accounted for about 3% of accidents, but nearly 1/3 of all deaths, an order of magnitude out of proportion. This prompted the Netherlands in 2017, a nation where almost 1/3 of cyclists use e-bikes, to completely redefine their classification system in 2017 to limit the speed to 15 miles per hour and to impose a minimum age of ownership to 15. And several EU nations followed their lead. And we updated our Marin Public Health Officer, Matt Willis, and the supervisors with our findings. But for the first year and a half of our efforts, our attempts to catalyze change were challenging in this very confusing landscape. What changed everything was in September of 2023, the story of Miss Amelia Stafford, who was treated at Marin Health after a serious e-bike accident, which catalyzed county and statewide action. She courageously shared her story publicly to protect youth all across the nation. She was featured in this New York Times article, highlighting the efforts of her UCSF neurosurgeon, Dr. Blake Taylor, to intervene with urgent life-saving neurosurgical care. There's a photograph of the portion of her skull that had to be removed in order for the life-saving procedure to be performed. Her accident prompted Marin EMS to act immediately. They began e-bike data collection a month or later. They later issued a Marin public health advisory after they noted a 5-fold increase in injuries for the 10 to 15-year age group on e-bikes compared to all other age groups, a trend that has persisted until today. By December of 2023, the American College of Surgeons joined the San Francisco Marin Medical Society with Assemblyman Damon Connolly to support Assembly Bill 1778 to prohibit anyone under the age of 16 from operating a Class 2 e-bike in our state, to align with restrictions that relate to Class 3 e-bikes. Interestingly, a Marin grand jury had been convened and we independently made the same identical recommendation. The legislation also mandated helmet use by all riders of Class 2 e-bikes. And it's interesting that if Marin had actually followed the European lead, then Class 1 e-bikes would also have been included in the Assembly Bill 1778. The bill really highlights the Consumer Product Safety Commission recommendation that children under the age of 12 should not operate any device that travels more than 10 miles per hour. We were joined with state and national data that was soon published with further support and evidence. In 2024, UCSF researchers reported a dramatic 49-fold increase in e-bike-related head trauma nationally in the preceding 5 years. Another analysis of the California SWITTERS traffic database showed that e-bike collisions increased 19-fold in the space of 5 years, from 184 to nearly 3,500. And you can see the data from UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital, which showed in 2023 that there was a sudden spike in e-bike related head trauma. This is really, I think, best highlighted in this effort from Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego, which was just published. And the lead author noted that e-bikes are an increasingly common pediatric public health problem with an injury pattern more closely resembling motor vehicle collisions. They noted that injuries, they had only seen one pediatric e-bike patient in 2021. In 2025, they saw 201 after seeing 125 in 2024. This dramatic increase is of grave concern. The lead author stated, we basically have kids riding vehicles that are much more like motorcycles and bicycles. Many of them have not taken a class on how to ride them safely and don't know the rules of the road. They've shown that children injured on e-bikes are more likely to present with multi-system trauma, they have higher injury severity scores, they have a greater need for ICU admission and for operation. E-bikes are allowing everyday riders, including children, to travel at speeds that usually only professional cyclists can achieve after training for many years to handle safely. And when the crashes do occur, the added mass and velocity of the e-bike produces forces far exceeding those of traditional bicycles. And it was for these reasons that all 3 California ACS chapters joined to sponsor AB 1778, testifying in support before committee, and in September, Governor Newsom signed the legislation at Amelia's home. The legislation also required a 1-month youth-targeted public educational campaign before implementation. The task force was created. I was appointed to help develop the content with school leaders, bicycle advocates, and law enforcement partners, and I'm really grateful to share that the effort, I believe, was successful. There have been no Marin e-bike deaths since the implementation of that program. It's really the key realization that without educational requirements at the point of sale, that greater regulation is necessary. I would highlight that virtually every e-bike sold in America would be unlawful for sale as an e-bike in the European Union and would instead be regulated as a moped because the motor is 3 times too powerful. As Supervisor Speier highlighted, the Mateo, the regulations regarding the operation of e-bikes on roads, impounding unlawful vehicles, stricter enforcement, convening special committees and task forces can all be explored to address local concerns. The Marin experience really resonated nationally because we were on the leading edge to describe what I believe now is a growing epidemic across America. According to the New York City Department of Transportation, bicycle deaths reached a 24-year high in the year 2023, as 30 people were killed on a bicycle, 23 of whom were riding an e-bike. This represents a 20-fold increase of risk of dying after an e-bike crash compared to a traditional pedal bicycle. They've attributed this to increased delivery services, bi-directional bicycle lanes on the same side of the street, and the proliferation of city rentals. Significant concerns are related to the heavier weight of e-bikes, which increase the kinetic energy and risk of injury. And for those of you who may have watched the Saturday Night Live 50th anniversary special, you may recall seeing Scarlett Johansson in a cast and a sling with a black eye, singing about the threat of e-bikes to pedestrians. I'm grateful to be working with about 30 surgeons across California now, and we've turned our focus to protect riders across the state, nationally and globally. We drafted this American College of Surgeons statement that was adopted in June of 2025. We were joined with statements by the American Academy of Neurological Surgeons and the American Academy of Orthopedics. This was all inspired by Mueller. We are currently working with the California Medical Association, the American Medical Association, and the American Academy of Pediatrics to support e-legislation. Along the way, we also tried to partner with the Centers for Disease Control. We noted that helmet recommendations existed on their website for bicycles, motorcycles, mopeds, and other electric mobility devices, but not for e-bikes. We had planned an update to the CDC website in the spring of 2025, but the layoffs of CDC staff abruptly canceled those plans. 3 consumer product safety commissioners were also terminated in the spring, and the commission currently functions only with a chair and 1 member. And in light of that, I do applaud their recent recall for rad power e-bike lithium-ion batteries in December of 2025 to protect the public. So to conclude, I believe that the key steps moving forward are to address the fragmented state-by-state variable approach, which is generating confusion for consumers, retailers, and law enforcement. We really have to look to understand the full scope of the problem to the root cause, which was H.R. 727, passed by Congress in 2002. This law defined a low-speed electric bicycle as having fully operable pedals, a motor of less than 750 watts, and a maximum speed of 20 miles per hour. H.R. 727 declared that e-bikes are not motor vehicles, which would have placed them under federal transportation safety standards, and instead placed them under the jurisdiction of the Consumer Product Safety Commission. This removed any requirements for licensure, registration, insurance, education, and also allowed their use on sidewalks. New Jersey recently took action to repeal the 3-class e-bike system and to actually require insurance and to impose age restriction. It's interesting that in California, to operate an e-scooter, you must have a driver's license, even though it has only a 400-watt motor and travels at lower speeds, usually maxing out around 15 miles per hour. I would note that there is no existing federal statute that addresses Class 3 e-bikes or Class 2 throttle mechanisms. Congress actually never defined a high-speed electric bicycle. There is a bill from New Jersey by Congressman Gottheimer that would direct the U.S. Transportation Secretary to create an education program nationally, H.R. 5265, which I do support. Urban road design, I believe, to enhance rider pedestrian safety is essential. And if you're interested, there's an article in the San Mateo Daily Journal about this topic with some suggestions. I think I'll finish by highlighting that some e-bikes, especially with Class 3, travel at comparable speeds to mopeds. The DMV limits mopeds to 30 miles per hour. finish by highlighting that the term e-motive has entered into the lay conversation. It has not yet appeared in any of the scientific articles, but as we learned in Half Moon Bay overnight, e-dirt bikes, e-motorcycles are a very serious concern. It's entirely logical that they would exhibit an injury pattern even more severe than lawful e-bikes. And so I applaud all the efforts here to improve safety across San Mateo County. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you, Dr. Ma. We invited Amelia Stafford to join us today, but she's missed too much school, so she couldn't come. But she did send a note. She says, I'm grateful that this conversation about e-bike safety is happening. My journey with e-bikes began with excitement and independence, but it quickly turned into a life-altering accident. What I believe was a safe, everyday way to get around resulted in a serious crash with lasting physical and neurological impacts. I'm encouraged to see so many people engaging in this discussion, and I support continued conversations and thoughtful policies that prioritize safety, especially for young riders. This will help others don't have to learn these lessons the hard way. Thanks for organizing this conversation about e-bike safety. Amelia. Okay, next is Bob Middlestat, a longtime resident of Marin County and retired trial attorney in San Francisco with decades of jogging, hiking, and biking on Mount Town. He has developed a passion for e-bikes and is a member of the Marin Municipal Water District Community Advisory Committee on e-bikes. Please help us understand the legal and jurisdictional landscape of e-bikes.
Thank you. So I don't forget it. I'm going to give a background on e-bikes and e-motorcycles, and I'm going to make 2 recommendations on how we can make a huge dent in the problem that we all have recognized. I'm talking locally. I applaud the efforts others are making at other levels, but in addition to the ordinance that's been proposed, there are 2 things I'm going to recommend. May I recommend this? You get in that dark one. One is school bans on throttle devices. And the other is enforcement existing laws. Existing laws on e-motors. And also, so I don't forget it, I'm working with the San Mateo County Office of Education Safe Routes to School, Teresa Valet Kelly, some of you may know, and they are taking the lead in this county along with others on trying to do something about this problem. They have an e-bike collaborative that met this morning. There was maybe this size or twice as much with a lot of law enforcement there. So I'm very optimistic about what San Mateo County is doing. Let's see if I can get my slides up. Okay. First, my credentials. I think it's important to say that I'm an e-bike advocate. I'm going to sound like I'm not an e-bike advocate in a little bit, but I draw the distinction between lawful pedal assist e-bikes and the throttle things that we're seeing kids ride. I have the unfortunate or dubious honor of being the poster child for San Francisco Chronicle's older adults getting exercise. But those are my credentials. I also want to introduce Nadine, if you don't mind. This is Blake Taylor's mower. Okay, pedal assist e-bikes. The legislature 10 years ago decided we want to get people out of their cars, we want to get them onto bicycles, including electric bicycles, but we don't want to go overboard. So how are we going to do it? What they decided was there's one category of e-bikes where you have to pedal. The motor helps you pedal, but you have to pedal. And they divided those into 2 classes, 1 and 3. Class 2, the motor cuts off at 20 miles an hour. Class 3 cuts off at 28 miles an hour. Any age can ride class 1, you gotta be 16 to ride class 3. The motors are limited to 750 watts. I ride a class 1, and I ride a class 3. I think they're great, and I'm not gonna talk anything more about them. What we're seeing though is all the problems with throttle devices are causing what we call a e-backlash, a backlash. Because people are lumping everything together. John in the medical literature used the term e-bike colloquially to mean everything with an electric motor in it. What I'm going to try and do is drill down a little bit and show you the difference between e-bikes legally and e-motorcycles, legally or illegally. Okay, so those are pedal assist. You might wonder why the most dangerous one, the ones with throttles, are class 2. You'll have to ask the people who designed that. But with the throttle ones, and throttles, most people know, like a motorcycle, you just turn the handle. You don't have to do anything with your feet. And the legislature had to decide, where are we going to draw the line between what we want to encourage people to do without licenses, without registration, without insurance, without safety equipment, without nothing, and all the motorcycles where we still want to have license, registration, and so forth. And so they said, well, let's pick 1 horsepower, 750 watts on the electric side, and 20 miles per hour. You know, as good as any other arbitrary line, right? And so that's where the line is. And that's where the problem started. Because if you're a manufacturer trying to sell these to kids, what are you going to do? You're going to compete on speed. So the first company, Super 73, said, okay, we're going to comply with the law. We're going to ship a bike limited to 20 miles per hour, and we're going to give the kids an app that they download on their smartphone. They hit one button, and they can go 30 to 35. And they claim that complies with the law. They're being sued in Marin County claiming that's not legal. But once they did it, almost everybody else followed suit. And so now you have a lot of brands selling these class 2 e-bikes when they're capable of 30, 35, 40 and above. There is the enforcement problem. That's the problem we're all facing. So I tried to figure out, what are the kids actually riding? And so I volunteered to Safer House to School, and I went around and I counted bikes. And I looked at the brands, and when I saw a brand that looked like a moped, I went to the website, retired, semi-retired lawyer that I am, and you would be astonished at, when you go on the websites, how they brag, they boast about how fast they'll go. And I'll show you some websites. And the other thing I was going to write here is district attorney. This is, if this doesn't sound like consumer fraud, I don't know what does. I'd like to say I represented corporate America at 2 big law firms for 50 years. I never saw a fraud as blatant as this. I never did. Okay, John talked about Marin County health data. And this was right at the start, and the kids 10 to 15 on electric devices, whether they're e-bikes, e-motos, or whatever, we didn't keep track of that, their accident rate was 5 times higher than any other age group on electric devices. When we ran the same numbers on regular bicycles, the difference was only about 1.5 times. And so we asked ourselves, it must be partly at least what the kids are riding. And that's when we went to the schools, and what we discovered was the kids were riding, good news, mostly in the blue, regular bikes. So anybody who tells you kids need e-bikes, not true. Most kids still ride regular bikes. But on the electric ones, we found that the red are the e-motos, and the orange are the regular legal e-bikes. And so it's you know, a huge difference. And this is just for the electric ones. And so in Santa Clara, San Mateo, and Marin, eerily the same. And I counted these, so I counted. But it's 12% were regular legal, 88% are e-motos defined as an electric throttle capable of more than 20 miles per hour. That's why People for Bikes has finally come around to our point of view. People for Bikes is a trade association for the U.S. bike manufacturers. And in September of last year, they came out with a 3-part story entitled, "The E-Bike Problem is an E-Moto Problem." The Minetta Transportation Institute, commissioned by the state legislature, just issued their report a month or two ago, and this is the headline on their press release. E-bike safety study identifies illegal overpowered devices as key problem. The e-bike problem is, I would say, mostly an e-moto problem. Not entirely, but mostly. This is Transportation Authority of Marin, Safe Routes to School, their blurb on the great e-bike con, and they go through what I've been saying, and so they're on board with this too. The slides will be available, and you can look at this in more detail. This is from the Minetta Institute report. It's 4 examples of things sold as e-bikes with advertised top speeds in the 30s. Sold as e-bikes, they're e-motorcycles. This is a collage of bikes that we see, there I go. E-motos that we see at local schools in Santa Clara County. San Mateo. Along with the electric scooters, need to have a driver's license. This is from a middle school. So it's not only San Mateo County, but it is San Mateo County. I could take the rest of my time showing you screenshots from the websites of these companies, but I'll only show you 2. Ride One Up, many of these at your local schools, top speed 35 miles per hour, unlocked. Unlocked means you use the app, or they give you a code that you put into the handlebar display screen. It's usually, these people are so inventive, 1919. You just put in 1919 and you can go, unlock. Super 73, 28 plus, the one at the top, 37 miles per hour. And this is what they advertise. This is not hacking. It's not modifying. It's like changing the volume on your iPhone. It's, okay. I said only one more. I'm going to show this one for one reason. This used to be a rich kid's problem. $6.99 on Walmart. You can get this bike that goes 28 plus. They say 28 plus because they want to sound like it's a class 3 bike. It can't be a class 3 bike if it's got a throttle. And 28 plus is really 37, 38, 39. So that too is misleading. These are brands that we see at the schools. And each of these, if you go to their website, they advertise top speeds with the throttle over 20 miles per hour. You can't, on the screen, you can't quite see the names, but this is a cheat sheet that we're providing to the law enforcement. Riding time, Gridstar, 2DO, Rap Bullet, Move Camp, really inventive. Q-Life, Zeus, Ride One Up, and so forth. Okay, and then finally, this is my favorite. 2DO doesn't even claim to be an e-bike. It's an e-motorcycle. 37 miles per hour, 2,000 watts. But what kids do is they go to Amazon, get a class 2 label, and plaster it all over the bike. And then, when I go to schools and I talk to the principal, or even to the SROs, this is an illegal motorcycle. Oh, no, it's not. It's got a class 2 label on it. Kids are really clever. Okay. So what do we do about it? When I talk to people, what I try and get them to do is to think about not what somebody else can do. God bless the CPSC and the national, all that. Good luck doing that. What I want to have you think about is what we can do. In addition to the ordinance, what can we do in this room? And I'd love to be able to just shut the doors and get everybody to agree we're going to ban these things at schools, and the police are going to enforce the existing law, whatever it takes. And then we'll work out the problems. Okay, for parents, buy pedal or pedal assist, buy locally, and buy legal. For communities, track the problem. Count the bikes, count the devices at your school, see what you're facing, and then start keeping the collision data like we're doing in Marin, except do it more granularly. You know, see what's causing the problems, an e-moto, an e-bike, a regular bike. And then, this is my motto, diagnose before prescribing. Let's figure out, and I took that from you, John, let's figure out what the problem is, because if we don't get the problem right, we're probably not going to get the solution right. So New Jersey, that John mentioned, they have restricted e-bikes, they're almost off the books now. The reason for that legislation, according to the press, was an e-bike accident. So, skeptical as I am, and knowing as much as I know about what people consider e-bikes, I did a Public Records Act request to the community in New Jersey. And they sent me this picture. Oh no, this was CBS. This was what they sent me from New Jersey. And I went on Google AI and I identified it as eBox 2 V2. I called the manufacturer, I said, how fast do you go? What are your wattage? Wattage 2,000, 32 miles per hour. I don't know how I feel about the New Jersey law at this point, but I do know it is not justified by an e-motorcycle crash. It may be justified on its own, but not for the reason they gave. So what do? We have 3 laws that allow law enforcement to get rid of these e-motorcycles. One is the basic one. It's illegal to drive a motor vehicle, and these are motor vehicles, without a driver's license or registration. This is less known. It's also illegal for parents, to give the keys to their car to their 14-year-old. And that's effectively what this is. Marin County now has charged 2 parents with this. Unfortunately, our district attorney has declined to prosecute, but we're still working at that. And then we always have, if there's an accident, endangering the health and safety of the child. Again, this doesn't take the place of other things, but this is something we can do today to start enforcing this. I know it's hard for the police to chase down kids. We don't want them to do that. The unusual thing about this crime, if you will, not to put too fine a point on it, is 5 days a week, 7 to 8 hours a day, these illegal devices gather in one place. The schools. And so this is classic opportunity for a school law enforcement partnership. E-scooters we talked about. Menlo Park, Kristen Gracia, superintendent of Menlo Park City Schools, was the first in this county to adopt a ban on all throttle devices. Her point was, okay, there may be 1 or 2 legal Class 2 throttle e-bikes, but it's so hard to tell the difference. You got to go to the websites, you got to do what I was doing, and there's so few that fall into that category. Let's make it easy. Let's protect kids' safety. Let's go overboard a little bit to protect kids. We're just going to ban throttle devices. She reports that she's got compliance. She has not had to call in law enforcement. So that's why I say the straightforward way to take care of this problem in the first instance is this. The victim of the Half Moon Bay, I'm told this morning by people from Half Moon Bay that he and a lot of other of his classmates ride Surons, an e-motorcycle, to their high school. Okay. This is a poster we're using in Marin schools, trying to get through to kids. The jig is up on e-motos. You can't do it anymore. If it's larger than 20 miles an hour, it's not street legal. Can't ride them anymore. This is a warning that Terralinda High School is placing on the e-motorcycles that they see. For some percentage of the kids, 50%, they're going to comply with this. Take it home. When their parents hear that it's unlawful to let them ride it, some percentage is going to do it. And there's going to be a percentage that don't do it, or their parents don't care, or they're not paying attention, and then that's when we need law enforcement. Final point, This is again, People for Bikes, the trade association, one of their publications. Who's responsible for the e-moto problem? You can blame it on the kids, you can blame it on the parents, you can blame it on the elected officials, you can blame it on whoever you want to blame it on, but ultimately it's the manufacturers and the retailers. They're defrauding the public by selling e-motorcycles as e-bikes. And it's not just illegal, it's dangerous. Electric Bike Center. This is Santa Clara, Palo Alto. This is on their website. How to make an e-bike faster, tips to unlock, just da-da-da. Call the salesman there. Name is John. Tell him you've got a granddaughter. I've got to say granddaughter. If I say son, nobody's going to believe me. Who wants to go fast on an e-bike? Don't give me this 20 miles per hour. What's the fastest thing you have? And he'll say, we've got 2 Chinese brands. We'll unlock them. We'll give you the code, or we'll just unlock it for you here. How fast do they go? Well, let me just double check. He goes out, test drives it, calls me back the next day, 42 miles an hour. You want to buy it? It's just blatant fraud. As I say, there's a lawsuit in Marin County against Super 73 by 2 parents who bought Super 73 thinking it was an e-bike. Turns out to be an e-motorcycle. They can't ride it to school, so they brought a class action. This is the hard way. You need somebody injured, you need a parent, and you go manufacturer by manufacturer. The district attorney for all the counties can get together and bring lawsuits against all the manufacturers, all the retailers who are selling their products here. And just a reminder that there is a Consumer and Environmental Protection Department. Okay, that's what I've got. I'll end as I started, which is thanks. The e-bike collaborative that the Office of Education is doing is recommending the school ban on throttles and working with law enforcement. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Doug. Spoken like a true trial attorney. Well done. All right, now we're going to hear from Sheriff Ken Bender, whose job it is to enforce these laws, not just in the county, but in a number of cities as well. And we're going to ask him how his department is approaching this issue. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Supervisor Speier. Really want to thank the supervisor for coordinating the town hall today, and Supervisor Mueller for support of the ordinance. And really, the past 2 speakers, you guys did such a phenomenal job educating. That's like 90% of my presentation, so I will be very briefly here, and we won't go over all the differences, but I will tell you right here, these 2 things are really critically important. The school board, the throttle and the bans with the schools, and we've got to enforce the e-motorcycles. So over the last couple of years, we've seen a lot of calls and complaints come in about e-bikes, and it really is a public safety issue. Last year in the Sheriff's Office, we responded to 15 accidents involving e-bikes, and that's just in the unincorporated areas and contract cities for the Sheriff's Office. There's 20 municipalities within San Mateo County, and each city has their own stats, so if you were to aggregate them, I don't have those numbers, but we're seeing the numbers rise. So it's an important public safety concern for our youth. So what are we doing? We are stepping up education and enforcement. And our school resource officers in the schools are educating both the students and the staff. We're working with school administration about what they allow on campus. And in fact, yesterday I attended a Coalition for Safe Schools meeting where we discussed this. And I'm getting feedback for what the various school districts and schools within our county are doing and what those rules are to make sure that we can enforce them appropriately. We're also trying to educate parents, and it's really important in terms of safety that there's proper equipment. So you learn about the difference between e-bicycles and e-motorcycles. And the e-motorcycles are really the concerning ones. You've got to be a licensed driver, either an M1 or an M2 driver's license, with a DOT-approved helmet and all of the lighting, braking, and other equipment that's required. And regardless of whether it's an e-bike or an e-motorcycle, the rules of the road apply to everyone. Bicyclists and drivers have to, stop fully at stop signs, stop lights, adhere to all the rules of the road. Anyone under 18, regardless of what they're riding, has to have a helmet on. And so we are enforcing those rules. We're issuing citations. If it's an e-motorcycle and they don't have a driver's license, then we can tow the vehicle, and that really gets folks' attention to make sure that they understand what the law is. And these cases are going to the courts and juvenile probation, and there's different remedies from education and fines as well. So that's really what we are doing in terms of enforcement. Issuing citations, trying to educate folks, and everyone heard about the accident yesterday over in Half Moon Bay, and that was on an e-motorbike. It was not an e-bicycle, but unfortunately the juvenile lost his life, and it's a tragedy that really drives home why this is important, why we're here. And I can't go into details of the investigation because it is open and active, but it's just a stark reminder that as parents, pay attention to what you're allowing your children to purchase, what you're purchasing for them, and when you do have this equipment, make sure that they have all the safety equipment and that it has the proper lighting and braking, and that whatever the law requires for the class that they have is being adhered to. And then we're going to do our part to make sure that when we see it, we stop and issue the citations. It was mentioned before, we don't want to get into pursuits. First of all, it's hard to catch. If you've got groups of bicyclists going in many different directions, it's sometimes hard to catch them, and we don't want to send a message as well that people can just do whatever they want and get away. But it really is incumbent upon all of us to come together, to be sending the message that we want our youth to be safe, they've got to follow the rules of the road, and they've got to do it the right way. So that's all I have. I brought one of my traffic detectives, if anyone has any rules of the road questions, and he's out there in the field every day issuing these citations.
Thank you, Chair.
So now we're going to open it up for questions and comments you may have, and we have a microphone here.
Go the other way.
I have a question for clarification on Class 2 e-bikes. There were a whole bunch of examples, and they all showed pedals. And I guess in the field, you're trying to look for the difference between a Class 1 and a Class 2, and other than noticing the style of the rider, it would be hard to without delving into the mechanics of it, it'd be hard to distinguish between a Class 1, 2, or 3, because they all, Class 2s seem to have pedals.
Bob's going to respond to this. Why don't you come here?
Actually, it might be just that I've been at this a long time, but I can notice the difference. The difference, there are two ways to see the difference. One is if a kid is going 20, 30, 40 miles per hour and not pedaling.
Right.
That's a giveaway. The other thing is most Class 1 and Class 3 look like what we think of bicycles. These other ones look like what we used to call mopeds or dirt bikes or whatever. So they're pretty easy to tell the difference.
Yeah, it's easy, but I guess to maybe a policeman, he may not know that. The other thing that I can tell is the seat height. Usually the wider the too wide.
afternoon. My name's Yvonne from Foster City. I'm a bicyclist, have been my whole life. Know every back alley in San Mateo. I'm here today. I've spent the past 8 years on the Foster City Parks and Rec Committee. I've really studied this issue in our town, and I wanted to share some observations. First of all, Bob, I couldn't agree with you more. There is no reason for someone under 16 to have a bike with a throttle. And what it's doing in our town is really scary. First of all, and I am out a lot and I count, more than 50% of the kids with e-bikes, no matter what kind it is, do not wear a helmet. And I don't know if you remember what it's like to be 13, but it doesn't feel really cool to have a helmet. And so that's start really scary. We have a levee in Foster City, I hope you all can not see it, that goes right along the bay. And there's a great trail there for both walkers and bikers. And I go there regularly, and e-bikers, both adults and kids, are going down that levee that has people walking, seniors, people walking their dogs, little kids on their scooters, going 25 to 35 miles an hour, barreling down the levee. Very scary. The thing that we haven't talked about yet, and I just want to raise, is there's a psychological issue with giving a middle schooler a bike with a throttle. These are good kids. I'm a boy mom, so we have a lot of good kids in Foster City. If you give them a bike with a throttle, and they can go 25, 30 miles an hour, some of these really good kids become punks. And they think they're their own little version of Hell's Angels. So the way that manifests itself is they'll be driving down a road, 4 or 5 of them. They will take up both lanes and not let anybody pass. And they think this is absolutely hysterical. And it's not, and it's dangerous. There's one thing I just wanted to, then I'm done, but a 13-year-old has their frontal lobe, their frontal cortex is not developed. And here's what science, it's one sentence, it's not a whole spiel, one sentence on how it describes the frontal cortex of a 13-year-old. It's under construction. As this area is not fully mature until the mid-20s, 13-year-olds often rely more on the emotional amygdala, leading to impulsive behavior, difficulty with long-term planning, and heightened risk-taking. These are not people we should be giving these bikes to. So I think it's our responsibility, and I'm so proud that you guys are taking this on, to make sure our kids are successful, but also make sure they're safe.
This one is probably for the sheriff, but I'm still a little fuzzy on what's legal and what's not, especially for you. So when you talk about an e-moto, which is basically a motorcycle with an electric motor, you have to be licensed, insured, and registered to drive it on the road. And then where do class 2s fall in as far as kids and what's legal and what's not?
Okay, so on the motorcycle, I'll have you help me, but yes, you have to have a driver's license with a class M1 or M2 license. The vehicle itself needs to be registered with DMV, there needs to be insurance and all of that, and then all the safety equipment. And then regarding class 1, class 2, was
Just class 2 with a throttle, what are the laws as far as kids running?
Yeah. Do you want to answer that?
Yes, please. So just to introduce just to introduce myself, my name is Deputy Christopher Larson. I'm one of the motors here at the Sheriff's Office and one of our major accident investigators. So to go over your question with Class 2, a Class 2 is an e-bike that goes 20 miles an hour maximum, has a max maximum wattage of 750 watts and can be pedal assisted as well as throttle only. And that's it. That's the legality of it. Now, can these 750 watt motors go faster than 20 miles an hour? Yes, they are capable of going faster than 20 miles an hour. However, these bikes have governors in them, what we call governors or limiters in them that don't allow them to do that. However, with quick Google search, with YouTube video, you can bypass that. With modification, you can bypass that. Now making these illegal. So, and class 2s don't have an age restriction, but once someone makes these bikes capable of going faster than 20 miles an hour, a more powerful battery, then it becomes an e-moto, or what we like to also call pocket bike, which is illegal on the roadway, if not without proper registration, license plates, and helmets, and equipment.
Paul Maggie, yes, council members, the afternoon day. Thank you for recognizing the tragic event that happened yesterday. And, you know, we all say, hopefully we can do something before it happens. It happened. And it did happen. So, it's great that we're trying to figure something out. Are we good?
Speak into it.
Are we good all right now?
Just keep it closer to your mouth, because they're voices.
Okay, I'll just talk louder, if that helps. But, again, I'm recognizing, you know, what happened in Half-Moon Bay. And there's always something we can do more. And I got a couple of comments and questions to bring up. As a former city engineer and public works director, even 15 mile an hour, these bikes are much heavier. And a lot of us, especially on the coast, have shared trails. That's a lot of momentum coming at you. So it's something we, you know, when your engineers ask for more money to separate bikes from pets, we have to figure out ways to try and do it. That's something, because I know shared trails 15 is awfully fast. And then reading quickly through the county's ordinance, we talk about a youth diversion program after you're busted. Well, is there something we can do? And somebody talked about point of sale, you know, there's some education process. But education can be tied into this. Now, I think it's unfair to throw it totally on the school. If there's a way we can tie it in at the point of sale and or just not, you know, again, I was reading a violation happened, and that's when it looked like the education through a youth diversion program would happen. Okay, here we go. But again, the youth diversion program, to me, seemed the education component, but it comes after you get, you know, caught for doing something you shouldn't have been doing. So anyway, I think, and maybe you're trying to make this ordinance as simple as you can for all 20 of us to adopt something, because we need to start moving quicker on this. I also want to put a sidebar here. I'm working with the League of Cities. I'm on the Transportation, Communication, and Public Works Policy Committee, and I'm on the e-bike task force. And the reason it's important to us, and I know how many other communities may have multiple jurisdictions on a particular trail, but look at our coastal trail. We could have private property owners, a land trust, state beaches, a city, and the county trying to keep things orderly and safe. This is all about safety. So I think this is a great start. I think we need to do something right away. But I want you to know that we, as part of this task force in the League of Cities, we're going to be pushing the legislatures to come up with something statewide.
So, Paul, you're right. I mean, having education is a very important component. At point of sale, you can ask these bike sellers to do that, but it's enforcement. And then when you have party-to-party purchases, you're not going to have it. So, I don't know, Bob or John, do you have any thoughts on education? What's happening in Marin that we might be able to copy?
Thanks
for the really important point. As part of 1778, we created an e-bikers club, and tried to encourage youth to participate and learn safety tips. I think one of the challenges I see, a lot of these e-bikes that have been advertised are actually lawful for sale in other states in America and around the rest of the world. So one of the real challenges is that the variable and inconsistent laws across the nation, it is promulgated by People for Bikes. They championed this in 2015, and it was actually our San Francisco City Attorney, David Chu, in his first year in the California legislature, that he started this wave of adoption across the United States, but they're inconsistent. There are certain states where you must be 18 to ride an e-bike. There are some states where these overpowered devices are actually lawful for sale. And so it puts the responsibility on the purchaser. And so what we can do further to strengthen is through the community, is through our elected officials in our schools. And I think that, trying to find a way of curtailing their sales and use is essential as we move forward. We need to do things immediately, and I will highlight there's real active legislation in Sacramento this year. There's legislation to limit e-bikes to 500 watts. There is other legislation being championed by Diane Kaplan that will address this loophole of continuous versus peak power. In my opinion, in reviewing, I think it would probably render almost every e-bike currently sold in California unlawful for sale in the future.
So the problem with much of this legislation is that it's introduced and it's strong and then it gets watered down. And that's why I think relying on some local ordinance and enforcement is going to be key. As you were talking about, I was thinking about Sawyer Camp Trail. When you think about all the various activities going on Sawyer Camp Trail, I worry about e-bikes, but I've also been told that bicyclists can go over 25 or 30 miles an hour. So, we've got some of these confined spaces that I think potentially are problematic as well. Yes.
Thank you.
I think we should use that mic. Where's the other?
Thank you so much for this presentation. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for hosting this event. I really appreciate it. I really appreciated the clarity of distinguishing between e-bikes and e-motorcycles. They are categorically different. A bicycle is a healthy, safe, wonderful form of transportation. An e-motorcycle has a risk profile I think is more similar to a motorcycle, which is why Dr. Ma is seeing such a high rate of injuries. I'm sorry, I forgot her name, to her point about the frontal lobe. Automobiles have been the leading cause of child death in this country for a century without a close second. We have about 85 years of evidence that if you give a child a powerful motor, they're going to kill themselves, their friends, and other people. And e-bikes have a similar risk profile. If you give a kid a powerful motor, they're going to take risks. And so I think regulating the e-bikes, as was suggested, a ban on throttles, and enforcing existing laws. And then the other thing that really is top of mind for me is a class action lawsuit. I think we have to, we don't regulate cigarettes at the individual level and remind kids not to smoke. We regulate the sale of harmful products. We regulate harmful exposures. And so I'd really love to see the San Mateo DA go after these companies for fraud with the class action suit. So I think that's a practical thing we can do. Even the threat of a lawsuit is likely to change behavior. And finally, obviously, in my district, there are a lot of young kids who ride these. How can I say this? I am very mindful that I don't want their behaviors criminalized or punished. I just want them to reach adulthood. I want their frontal lobe to develop and for them to become wonderful fathers and adults and all that. And so I think really banning it at the school level and going after the manufacturers is the right approach.
And requiring helmets. They're required now, but enforcing it. Other questions, comments? Yes, over here.
to revisit the training. So all motor vehicles are regulated by the state, as you've mentioned in your presentations. And for motorcycles, there's a CHP developed motorcyclist safety program. That program is 15 hours long over 2 days and 5 hours of classroom and 10 hours of practical instruction. I think that it would be useful for the state of California to also develop an e-bike safety program that could be taught by the schools. Because as long as we're going to allow children of any age to operate bicycles with electric motors on them, they have to know how to operate them safely. And my son, I gave him the CHP motorcycle training program when he was 16 years old, and it made him a very safe motorcyclist. Thank you.
So I want to comment to that, is we tend to burden the schools with the requirement to do a lot of activities that frankly we as parents should be doing. You would, if you're going to do that, it's going to take time away from classroom curriculum, and who's going to pay for that? So there's that element that we need to consider. I would actually think that asking for legislation that requires this education before you can buy an e-bike would make a lot of sense, and have the CHP come up with it.
My question is for Mr. Middlestat and Dr. Ma. Looking back on your efforts to pass 1778, any lessons learned, anything you would have done differently in the process?
You may have noted that 1778 was a Marin-only pilot. It was originally intended to be a statewide bill, but I'll share with you that there was very fierce opposition. There was another bill in 2284 in San Diego County, which restricted class 1, 2, 3 e-bike use to anyone over the age of 12. And so they're both separate pilots at this time. They're to report back to the California legislature before any other measures are undertaken in the state of California to restrict the age. But to be fair, e-bikes, there are important benefits, for people to be able to cycle to work and not have to shower to go uphill. I think responsible helmeted use by adults is perfectly fine and should be supported. Just want to reiterate, it is state law that anyone under the age of 18 wear a helmet when riding a bicycle. It applies. For some reason, people think e-bikes, so those laws don't apply, but they do. A friend of mine is a judge in Southern California, leads traffic court, and every violation brought before her for riding on the sidewalk, riding without a helmet, riding in the wrong direction, exceeding the speeds. It seems like, with a lot of these motorcycles that are traveling too fast, they should be caught violating local speed requirements. But anyway, she prosecutes them as forcefully as possible at the first hearing. It's a moving violation. It's a criminal offense. And so she really scares the kids and the parents straight and lets them off at the morning at the second hearing after they finish traffic school.
I actually have a question. Are these violations, when they're caught, reported to the policyholders' insurance companies?
That's a really good question. I think the answer is no, and I think another angle there is parents think they're covered by insurance for e-motorcycles. They're not. So one of the points we make to parents is, parents have huge financial liability if something goes wrong here, because their insurance isn't going to cover it. But on your question about lessons learned from 1778.
16 age restriction.
Yeah. Yeah. So Damon Connolly introduced it in the legislature in late 2023. The civil grand jury came out in April 2024, and even before 1778 was passed, the grand jury was recommending that the county for unincorporated areas, it's sort of like your setup, and our 11 municipalities all adopt ordinances requiring kids to be 16. John and I went to Board of Supervisors and 11 town and city councils urging them to do that. Nobody did it. And then the law passes, and the Board of Supervisors got behind it. And the Board of Supervisors passed their ordinance, and I don't know how much we bet, but I bet that no jurisdiction, no municipality was going to turn around. But it showed the power of the Board of Supervisors. is they said, we're behind this now that the law's been passed, everybody fell in line, and now we have the law, you gotta be 16. We've got the law, enforcement is not easy. So, passing the law is one thing, enforcing it's another.
I agree with Bob. I just really want to highlight it was the power of Miss Amelia Stafford. I really want to publicly thank her, credit her for the courage. She didn't speak out until the spring, but when she did, it was like a light switch had been turned on, and all of the opposition stopped.
Thank you. To Supervisor Speier's comment about we ask a lot of our schools, perhaps this could be an extracurricular type of thing. I loved the comment before about an e-bike club. Now, I think it's cool to belong to a club, and the kids can learn, you know, the rules of the road. And at Senator Becker's town hall, it was talked about, there's that piece plus the practical riding. So do kind of like a driver's ed type of two-part thing. And not only to schools, let's involve our scouts, our Boy Scouts, our Girl Scouts, anywhere that kids are, you know, congregate. They spend so much time at school, and there are a lot of extracurricular activities. Heaven knows parents don't necessarily need one more, but this is a safety thing. And give kids their little driver's licenses. And, you know, you pass it, Boy and Girl Scouts, you get your pin, your badge. So I think we can go a long way in taking advantage of schools and clubs where kids tend to be.
Yes, this may sound a little naive, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Why are we not talking about the state requiring driver's license? To me, that's the element. If you are required to take a test to get a driver's license, then you get the education along with the license.
I actually have one question for law enforcement, and that's that, is there any downside to doing like drunk driving checkpoints on the way to school? Where you actually said you would, oh, I'm serious, the kids have to they have to take the road to get to the school, so is there any drawback in doing that? Speech.
Yeah, I think just in terms of, we've got to do something creative like that to really drive home the education message and let everyone know that we mean business and it's for their safety. But I think back when I was a teenager, 12, 13 years old, we had a neighborhood kid who was probably 16, he had a moped, and you know, my dad wouldn't even let me on that bike, and if I tried to buy one, he would say no, but it was like it took good parenting to protect me. And we've all got to do that for our children, and there's like a fad right now for some of these things, and we got to make sure it's safe.
If I can just add to that, I think step one is to reach agreement on which of the brands are e-motos because they cross the line for e-bikes. And once there's agreement on that, and it wouldn't surprise you that I've got a brochure where I've identified the brands. But once we agree on that, I think all it requires, easy for me to say, is law enforcement presence at opening and closing bell, pointing out to the kids, I'm sorry, but this brand is an e-motorcycle. You probably don't have a driver's license because you're in middle school here. And just knock it off and come back tomorrow with it. We found in Marin that just having the police chief show up and be there at the bike rack, as long as he's not letting kids continue to ride the illegal ones, you know, it takes care of, you know, a huge part of the problem.
I just want to respond to Deborah's comment. I think that what struck me is that we require more of mopeds, of scooters, than we do of these bikes that can take off and do so much damage to individuals. And I I do think that requiring them to be registered, requiring them to have insurance would, frankly, would help the families, because without insurance, they're going to be sitting there with huge bills associated with any loss of life or injury that occurs to someone as a result of their child riding a bike. So, part of this can be done by the state. Unfortunately, what happens is the manufacturers go up there. Forgive me for being so straight about this, but, a couple of $1,000 contributions to a member's campaign, and all of a sudden they lose interest in pursuing it. This, to me, is a public health and safety crisis, and we have got to require that action be taken on a state level, and clearly other states have done it. So, we're somewhat behind the 8 ball in my view.
Hi, I wanted to comment. Bob, you were somewhat dismissive about what New Jersey has done, right? And I understand, they've gone too far. I can understand that because of the fact that parents or the general public are confused. I mean, with all the different classes, we hear it all the time, you see it in the audiences, people are trying to understand what are the differences, which are legal, which are not legal. And I actually would, my opinion is that I think the emphasis should be on the injuries, not what, which are the vehicles. Because if you look at the types of injuries that Dr. Ma was describing, is that it's something inherent with the e-bikes or even the e-scooters, and it has to do with the speed, the acceleration in terms of the bikes, the very heavy weights that, this is what is creating the problem. But again, it's also the confusion because of the fragmented laws and also all the variations on the theme that we have with the bikes. So I can understand why New Jersey went ahead and did that.
My only point, just to be brief on this, was that when an e-motorcycle is involved in an accident, the answer to me is to enforce the law against e-motorcycles. We don't need new laws to enforce the existing laws. That was my point. It may well be that there's room to restrict e-bikes even more than they're restricted now, but to me that's a separate discussion.
Okay, I want to thank you all for joining us. We're going to close this portion of the program. If you want to ask questions of our experts, I'm sure they'll stay for a while to answer your questions, but we really appreciate the fact that you came out. How many elected officials? I see quite a few. So it really shows an interest in the cities in joining us in coming up with a solution locally. And truly what happens, if we do something, the state may want to make sure we don't have 58 different counties with different rules and regulations, and they might take it seriously and adopt something that's statewide in nature too. So thank you all.